Every time they sell one Igloo cooler, they're making $20. That Yeti cooler is $400, 10 times the cost, but every time they sell one, they're making $200. So if Yeti just sells 10% of what Igloo is doing, Walmart, for example, will make the same money,
Right.
carrying 10 times less stock.
Welcome to Manufacturing Insiders. I am so excited about this conversation today. Cody and I had a really great pre-interview conversation. And this podcast is really for that person. And I know there's a lot of you out there that has had an idea in your head and it's been in there for a long time. You really haven't known what to do, but it's a product idea that you want to bring to market. Cody is not only a very experienced product developer, but he's very experienced in getting products on the shelves of major retailers. And he's done that for his own products and built multi-million-dollar businesses. And now he's kind of working towards helping other people do the same process that he's done for himself. And, so he's going to kind of talk about some of the pitfalls that a lot of people get into when they hire a company to help them with product development, whether it be legal, financial, just a whole realm of possibilities there. But this is just going to be really good for anybody that's had a product idea and just anybody that wants to get inspired about what you can build from really nothing, just having the drive, the motivation, and the creativity. So welcome to Manufacturing Insiders, Cody.
Thank you, Nate. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this. I think we're gonna have a good time today.
Yes, we are. Before I get too far into it, I'd just like to make a quick note. If you are enjoying the content that we're putting out, please subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. Like and share our videos. Listen to us on your way to work. One other note, if you're a leader that has experience and insights that could benefit other leaders in manufacturing, go to manufacturinginsiders.com, fill out the form there, and we'd love to have you on. So Cody, let's start with Lights-All and how that company came to be. And I really want to hear some of the backstory too about kind of your early sales days and how you were able to connect with buyers.
Sure. So, I guess it depends on how far back we go, right? So we won't go way, way back, but it all started really, in my early 20s, right? And so, my wife and I had our first son at 18 years old, right? I think I was 19, she was 18. And so I realized early on, like, I've got to figure something out. I've got to do something. And, to be honest, all through high school, I never gave college any thought, right? I was just always a guy that was like, I'll figure it out, right? My dad didn't go to college. No one in my family's ever gone to college. And so that's just how it always was. But when I knew my son was coming into the picture, I was like, okay, I got to figure this out now. And so I knew like sales was where it's at, right? Because in sales you can kind of dictate your income. It's based upon the output and so forth. And so the one thing I realized I was good at was developing relationships, right? And so I think that's like a catalyst in all sales, is developing that relationship. And I think that goes back to like, growing up, my childhood, right? I think we talked about this a little bit, but I was born in Peru, Illinois, where my business is today. But between, preschool and 5th grade, I lived in 6 different cities, right? So I had to go to 6 new schools. And so I was always trying to make new friends, introduce myself. And so that became very natural to me, right? And so sales was just a natural fit, building those relationships, making the calls. And so when I was 19 years old, I'm like, okay, if I want to make any money, I need to get a sales position, right? And so I worked different jobs, advertising sales, even insurance sales. And there was a local company looking for a marketing manager, right? And at the time, I thought marketing was sales, right? Same thing. And so I applied, and it was a position that was $60,000 a year. Now, I remember this is 15 years ago, more than 15 years ago, almost 20. And so to me, that was a lot of money. I'm like,
That's not bad.
I want this job. So I applied, I called, and I wasn't qualified. And I literally begged for a position. So the owner brought me in, and he basically said, hey, Cody, you're not qualified for this marketing position, But I've got this other company we started and we sell batteries, right? Double A's, triple A's, C's, and 9 volts. And he said, I could set you up with a van and then you can just go into, convenience stores and local stores and try to get our batteries on the map. And so that's what I did. And he started me out at $200 a week, which sounds terrible. And it was, right? $5 an
Then that's
hour.
60,000. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But it gave me the freedom to do the other things that I was doing as well, like selling insurance. And so, long story short, filled up the minivan, went to a town called Peoria, Illinois, about an hour away from here. And I spent about 30 days just on the road. No training, right? Which honestly, we're selling batteries, right? The double A,
Yep.
triple A's, not a lot of training involved. And so I hit the ground running and I got lucky because the very first door I went to was a gentleman from Pakistan. And he was an immigrant, go-getter, motivated guy, owned his own store. And I developed a relationship with him on that very first call. And he bought off me. And then he said, hey, by the way, I want you to go see Jacob, right? He's 3 blocks down. So I went and saw Jacob, did the same thing. Then he sent me somewhere else. And by that very first day, I had like 8 to 10 accounts closed right away.
Wow.
And so, that just kept snowballing, right? They kept referring. And so at the end of the month, I had about 30 accounts, 40 accounts maybe. And I think the sales were like $3,000, $5,000, somewhere in there. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, I know how business works, right? If I sold $5,000 worth of product, that cost the company $2,500. So I made the company $2,500. Now I know as an employee, I can only make a small portion of that. And so I thought to myself, man, how am I ever going to get out of this $200 a week pay, right? Because it takes a long time to get into these accounts. And my dad said, Cody, you're calling on Mike that owns one convenience store. What if you called on someone that has 400? You're still going to be working with one Mike, right? And so I said, well, that's kind of a good way to go about this. And I said, well, do you have any ideas, Dad? And my dad says, well, every day when I'm driving to Iowa, I see these come and goes and they're everywhere. So I looked up Come and Go, saw they had 435 stores. And I literally just picked up the phone, cold called, hey, who does the battery buying for the stores? Got the buyer on the phone. Turns out he has some kids that were my age and some younger kids. Just built that rapport, got a meeting with him, and went to Des Moines, Iowa to meet with him. And they ended up buying a counter display for every one of their stores, 435 of them. And it was like a $60,000 order. And that's when it clicked. That's when I was like, man, this is what I need to be doing, not calling on onesies and twosies. And to be honest, Nate, the sales process was exactly the same as it was selling to that one convenience store, selling to Mike, right? Now, the difference is it didn't come with referrals, right? Like a retail buyer is not going to say, hey, go sell to my competitors. But that's when my thinking really changed, and that those economies of scale is how I started to think from that point forward, right? And so that was my first retail chain, and that was when I was like, okay, this is what I want to focus on, is really developing these retail chain customers, working with one buyer, developing that relationship, and giving them solutions to their issues and problems. So I would say that's where it all started, Nate. Is the retail was at that company. And
so you talk a lot about the relationship building, and I think it's such an important part of the sales process. And really everyone needs sales expertise. I think what a lot of people struggle with is the relationship side of things, because it's very difficult as a salesperson to come off as anything other than what you are, which is, I'm trying to get you to buy my product.
Yeah.
How do you approach that, like that genuine feel to that conversation? Like, what are the first things you say? I mean, it sounds like you created a connection with you having kids and they had kids. I mean, that's one thing, but like, how do you go about that process?
Yeah, I mean, the first step is you have to be very confident and know exactly why you're calling on these accounts, right? And so when it came to Come and Go, I knew, and it's still to this day truth, right? Over 70% of the battery market is owned by Energizer and Duracell, right? They dictate the market. You walk into a Walmart, you walk into any store, the Duracell and Energizers are selling at the same price point, right?
Hmm.
So that leaves the rest of the market. And so the rest of the market is the cheap off brands, right? And so a lot of these brands are, let's just say it out, they're cheap Chinese brands. And when it comes to those brands specifically, they're selling based upon whoever's the cheapest, right?
Hmm.
It's a race to the bottom. And so what we wanted to do is create a battery that looked like a legacy brand or a household brand, but at the cheap Chinese prices, right? Somewhere
Hmm.
in between the two. And so I know that when it comes to these convenience store retailers, people that are buying batteries at a convenience store, they're not doing it simply out of convenience, right? They're doing it because they need it. It's a necessity, right? Little Johnny's in the back seat with his Walkman. Remember, this was 20 years ago, right? The
Right.
batteries are dead, screaming and hollering. They need a battery right now. And so, from that perspective, I think to myself, like, okay, so if the customers are coming into the store, they're going to buy a battery, right? They're leaving with a
Hmm.
pack of batteries. Why sell a Duracell 4-pack for $6? Why not sell ours for $4? You'll make the same margins, right? You're going to make the same penny profits, but now you're going to go after both customers. The one that needed the battery out of necessity, but then you also may attract customers that were coming into your store to buy a 20-ounce soda or what have you. And
Right.
so that was my idea when I called on Come and Go. And that's exactly why they bought the counter displays. Because historically, if you wanted a battery, you go in this section in the back of the store where they sell oil and fuses and so forth. And so we
Right.
put this display right in front of the counter. And so again, it was back to learning and knowing what
Hmm.
challenges they have, right? Presenting the solution to them. And when you do that, you said something really keen. We're all salespeople, right? I like to think of myself as a resource, right? And so when you can continually deliver and understand the challenges of your customers, you're no longer looked at as a sales guy. You're a resource
Right.
for them, right? They reach
Right.
out to you for that. And so that's always been how I've positioned my relationship building, right? If I cannot solve a solution to their challenges, the relationship is great, but there's not going to be anything else to it, right? And so we all have limited time and bandwidth. And so I always tell people, like, focus on the people that you can provide the biggest and best solutions for, and then
Hmm.
develop those relationships.
That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I think that knowledge of understanding what these retailers need and want is such a critical aspect to what you can bring to people that are developing products. Because I mean, it's one thing to create the coolest product in the world, but if it doesn't fit into the existing business model of a retailer, it's no good.
Yeah.
Um, and so you learn that on the ground. I mean, you learn that very early by going into these shops and developing those relationships. So tell me like what it looks like when somebody comes to you with a product idea. What's kind of your first steps? Do you disqualify some people? Do you kind of tell them, hey, I'm sorry, your idea sucks? Like,
Yeah.
how does that work?
So I think that's something I have difficulty with, because there's multiple facets to this. One is I may not know how valuable your product is because I'm not in the trenches, right?
Right.
I don't see the same challenges that you may be seeing. And so I don't ever want to discount something just based upon my opinion, right? And
Mhm.
so but some things you can look at very quickly and be like, yeah, that's not going to work.
Right.
That's just frivolous innovation. And so, my hard time is I hate confrontation and I hate hurting people's feelings. And so that's something that I'm trying to get better at, right? Is being just upfront because you know you're doing a disservice if you're not, right?
Right.
And so at the end of the day, we try to really gauge and see the products of which that we can truly help people bring to market, right? And so, with my concept to consumer company, our profitability isn't in helping people file patents, right? It's not helping people become retail ready. The profitability comes after all that's done, and then we're manufacturing the product. And
Hmm.
so, we're not just ones to just take anybody and everybody, right? We don't want to just say, I've got this product I want to create and get molded and such. Well, hey, $20,000 will get that done for you, right? We really take a different approach in understanding the entire goal of the company, where they want to go. And then we have to make sure, like, okay, we can really strategically help you, right?
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
been people, actually right now, there's an inventor. She's got an incredible product. She's doing almost $1 million a month in sales, right? And she's doing it on
Wow.
Amazon. And we chose not to work with her. And it wasn't because the product wasn't any good, but in order to get into retail, there's so many things that are required in terms of packaging, compliance, the way it looks, all that stuff.
Hmm.
And she's
Hmm.
just not there yet, right? And so that was one that we had to say, okay, you know what, we're going to take a step back. When you get closer to where these things are aligning, we can work together, right? And
Hmm.
so, it's it's quite the evaluation process, right?
Hmm.
When it comes to that, and it comes down to that, you know, concept to consumer is not my I guess my end all business, right? My flashlight company is my bread and butter. That's where I spend all my time. And so anybody that we're working with, like I said, we just want to make sure that there's a huge runway.
Right. So when you look at a product idea, are there some key characteristics that tell you right off the bat, without even knowing what the market potential is for it? Are there some key characteristics that you can just say yes or no? Either this is going to fit in with, a retail store's model, or like, what do you look at?
I mean, for the retail store model, one thing that's very important is that it clearly showcases what the product is doing, right? And so in retail, it's a lot different than online, because online you can have a video, it plays, right? Most of your traffic is directed towards your product individually, right? Or in a retail store, you've got someone coming in to buy a gallon of milk, and
Hmm.
they're walking through the store. And so I like products that tell the story very quickly, right?
Right.
I like products that you don't have to talk somebody into why they need them, right? If you think
Right.
about flashlights, it's dark half the time. I never have to talk somebody into why they need portable lights.
Right.
It's a matter of why they need mine, right? And
Yep.
so I try to look at products that are very, very self-evident, right? You look at them, you
Hmm.
say, "Oh, I know what that does," right?
Yep.
Very, very quick turns. And so I think that's one of the biggest things, is looking at products that solve a problem and you instantly identify it as, wow, why didn't I think of that? Right?
Yep.
I think those are
Yep.
the best ones. And then, products that tell a story, right? I think the people that are inventing the products are very critical to the success of it. I think when it comes to flashlights, that's why we've been pretty successful, right? I started the company. I
Yep.
own the company. I call on these accounts. These retail buyers are real people, right? They're just like you and I,
Hmm.
right? They want to work with people
Yep.
they like. They want to work with people they trust. And so when an
Yep.
inventor is present in the company and they have that story and they're willing to tell it, that's also very attractive to us in helping develop those items, right? Um,
That's a really good point. Yep.
and so, you hear that a lot too. I don't know if you watch Shark Tank, but most of the guys on Shark Tank say that same thing. They're really investing in the person, right? And
Hmm.
so
Yep.
the person is very important for us too, of who we work with.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I completely agree with that. The story, and a while back, and I recommend this book all the time, but a while back I kind of recognized my own deficiency in sales, and I realized that I'm not a really good storyteller. Like, I'm a very factual person. Like, I'm
Mhm.
like, I can do this for you, I can do this for you, I can make you this much money, this many leads, whatever. But I'm not good at like giving that kind of emotionally charged story. And so I read this book by a girl named Kendra Hall called Stories That Stick. And it is excellent, excellent book. But she goes through the types of stories that you should know in business. Like, there's the sales story, there's the founder story, there's one other one. But one thing that really stuck out in my mind about the storytelling is there's a science to it. There's a recipe for a good story, and some of the elements are: number one, have an identifiable character in your story. So, hey, I was talking to this guy, Joe. He was a middle-aged guy, had a couple kids, and he was really struggling. So then you have the struggle, the
Mhm.
emotion. He was really struggling with this thing. It was frustrating him, et cetera, et cetera. So then you have after the emotion, then you move to the the solution. But she really lays out perfectly what the elements of a good story should be. So
Yeah.
great book. I recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, I think when you think about a story, it's almost like a movie, right? There's the hero in the story,
Yep.
right? There's who saves the day. There's a conflict, right?
Yep.
And then there's the ending where everything comes together, right?
Yep.
And so I think when we formulate those stories, that's what we have to think about, right? People love conflict. People love having a hero, and everyone loves a good ending, right? And
Right.
so that's kind of how I try to frame those things, right? Almost like we're making a movie.
Right. Yep.
And I think that brings up a good point too, Nate, is like, the vulnerability of an inventor, right? You're just getting started. You've got this incredible product. The whole world needs it, right?
Yep.
And that's something I lean on as well. It worked really well when I started my company at 24, the flashlight company, right? I'm a 24-year-old kid, right? Getting started, really cool products. I just need a little help, right? And that was what I did with Dana back at Come and Go. Like, hey, I'm just getting started. I'm 19 years old. Can you just give me a meeting? I just want to see
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah, blah. And the meeting came, right? And then you show up, right? And then you're prepared when you show up. But I think that vulnerability and that transparency really goes a long way with not just retail buyers, anybody, anybody you're trying to, I guess, sell.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing I really liked about your approach. I mean, you showed me a kind of a slide deck, or I'm not sure what the technical terminology is for when you were approaching Tractor Supply, I think it was, with a product, and you lay everything out there. I mean, you know exactly what matters to them, and you can show what their profit margins on this are going to be, how you're going to display it, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the retail buyers specifically, like, the buyer at Tractor Supply is probably buying 5,000, 10,000 different items, right? And
Right.
so for them, their job is extremely difficult because if they're sourcing, say, this lighter, for example, or a lighter like it, right? They're going to go out to 5 or 6 different suppliers. The 5 or 6 suppliers are going to give them what they want, what they already have, right? And they have to compare it all. They got to make sure they're not going to have buyer's analysis, paralysis, what have you, right? They have to compare everybody's stuff. We do that for them, right? So when I'm creating a presentation, I'm showing them, okay, this is what's on the market today. This is what blah, blah, blah is doing. This is what so forth. This is what you're doing. This is what our price is. This is where you'll fall in the marketplace. And so at the end of the day, they don't have to think about all that stuff, right?
Right.
The easiest decisions for us to make are the easiest decisions, right? When everything
Right.
is spelled out for you. And so that's what
Right.
we do in our presentation, right? We're going to show them comps, prices, why your customers need this product, and so forth. So everything is spelled out for them. But in order to
Right.
do that, you have to understand that customer, right? And so that goes into asking questions, right? In Tractor Supply's business, the question I asked was, where do you see this category going in the next 36 to 48 months? And their answer was, it's going to stay pretty flatline, because in this category, it's not one that has a lot of innovation, and it's not a category that's easily promoted. It's the grilling category. And so you're never going to see a grill sold at the registers, right? And that's
Right.
where most of those incremental increases in sales come from. And so I said, I'm going to focus on developing products that are very niche and novelty associated with grilling, and we're going to put that at the registers, right? And so just by doing that, I would imagine that they're going to probably do an extra $3 to $4 million in sales this year in their category, right?
Right.
That's very attractive to a buyer, right? A buyer is always judged on what they did the previous year, previous quarters. And so now it's just a matter of connecting products that solve that solve their goals, right? Help them move closer to it. And so, I always tell people to make a PowerPoint is easy, right? To make that PowerPoint I showed you, it probably took about an hour, right? But for us to do what's required in that PowerPoint, it's dozens or hundreds of hours in that market analysis and development and all that good stuff. So, there's a lot of different thoughts that go into it.
Yep. I just actually, while you were talking, I just had a really good idea for supplementary grill accessory, which I'm going to tell you afterwards. It'll
Good.
take nothing to develop because it already exists, but you just rebranded for grilling. I
Yeah.
got it.
Perfect. And that's how the product development comes about, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone's trying to invent a wheel. Well,
Yeah.
just got to make it better, more efficient, cheaper, right?
Yep.
More,
Yep.
a little more innovative. So,
Yep.
that's all it
It's
takes.
funny that you said invent a wheel because that's exactly what it is.
Oh boy. Well, I'm ready to hear about it after this.
Yeah. No, I mean, I thought it was super cool. Like just talking to you initially kind of inspired me to, dredge up an old idea that I had. And I'm looking forward to kind of moving that forward. And I think it has a ton of potential.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing about that idea was too, it's kind of like the opposite of your light company, like the exact
Yeah.
opposite effect.
Hey, we're still denying the dark though.
Right.
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 So it all plays hand in hand.
It does. It does. So, talk to me about the manufacturing. What are some mistakes that people make, when they're bringing a new product to market with the manufacturing side of things?
I mean, there could be so many, to be honest, but I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is getting in over their head when they get started, right? And so we're working with some inventors right now. They're selling their product on Amazon. They're paying a lot for their product. It's a $25 retail. I think they're paying like $8, right? Which when you're selling for 25, $8 isn't too bad. We actually went in and we're requoting that, and we're able to get their cost down to $1.80 from $8.
Wow.
So tremendous cost savings.
Yeah, that's
In order to
huge.
do that, we have to create a mold in China, right? That mold was $12,000. And so what I told them was, hey, rather than creating the mold, buying 30,000 pieces, which is the MOQ, let's create a retail ready program where we have that document, we have those sales flyer, we have the PowerPoint, we're creating the story in the retailers, and then let's start contacting retailers, right?
Yep.
Because in retail, rarely are they buying today for something next week. Everything is planned out in a retail store, right? That whole planogram is a year in advance. And so what would happen is if let's say we show that to Walmart, and Walmart's like, man, I love this. We want to roll this out. All we need is a good presentation and some samples, right?
Yep.
It's going to be a 9-month to a 12-month process anyhow. And so once you get that commitment, whether it's a soft commitment, then you can commit in producing your mold, bringing in an inventory, right? Now, if you want to sell on Amazon, you need that now, right? You need that product today, right? And so it's just a matter of really understanding your own cash flow, your own, your own physical finances, right? But I think when it comes to retail, there's an approach that does not have to be costly, right? When I look at my flashlight company, I started this business with $150,000. I've never borrowed money since then, right? And we've done a few $100 million in sales. And when I got started, that's how I started my business, right? I got the sales, we brought in the product. With the profitability of that sale, I brought in more profit, right? And so that's how we did it. And now today, we work with banks, obviously, with a line of credit and such. But again, we talked about this before we started our call. You hear a lot of people say, like, burn all the bridges. So you only have one option, right? That works for people. But I also think that if you do that and you spend all your money on molds and inventory, you're going to be at a position in your business that you're going to be very, very stressed, right? And at the end of the day, if it comes to, paying your mortgage, paying your car payment, feeding your kids, if you're in that circumstance and you have your business, a lot of people are going to quit the business and go find something to fill that void immediately. And that's when they get stuck in that cycle, right? They're just over broke. And then the dream kind of fades away because that's what happened the last time they tried it. And so I would say, to answer your question, Nate, one of the biggest pitfalls is getting in over your head and trying to do too much too fast without having those sales lined up, or without having a strategy to know, okay, this is how we're going to recoup that, right?
Right.
And so, that's the approach we take is, understanding who you're selling to, If it's retail, you're going to have time to build up and scale up to that.
Right. And that's such great advice, because not only do you feel more comfortable when you're spending the money on the product and the inventory when you already know that you have it sold, but also kind of starting with sales, starting with getting the buyer lined up, tells you if your product sucks as well.
Yeah, and uh, that's also two faceted, right? The buyer might tell you your product sucks because you didn't relay the value good enough, right?
Right.
And so that's why that presentation is important, knowing your customer is important, and really knowing the story of the product, right?
Right.
When we think about brands today that are killing it, they don't even promote the product, right? Think about Red Bull. If you look at Red Bull's marketing, people aren't drinking a can of Red Bull. They're jumping out of airplanes, right?
Right.
They're jumping their dirt bikes off of mountains, right, and cliffs. Same thing with Liquid Death, right? It's rebellion, right? That's what's selling those products, right? You think about Monster Energy. Monster sells a 16-ounce can for $3, $4. Well, 5-hour energy came into play a few years back, right? 15 years ago, or what have you. Completely different audience, right? Monster went after the adventure people, the rock stars. 5-hour energy went after guys like you and I, hustlers. We're just busting, and then come 3 o'clock, we get tired. That was their story. That's their customer. They knew that very well, and so it's important. That's what's very important when you're developing a product, is understanding the entire model, not just like what this product does. Okay, it lights up, right? People don't care about that. It's like it lights up, so now you can fish at night, you can hike at night. Like, that's what people get excited about, not
Right.
just lighting something up, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's funny. I never really thought about the marketing difference between 5-hour energy, but you're exactly right. Like, I will take a 5-hour energy, but I don't think I've ever had a Monster.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a health conscious thing too. Like, I'm not going to drink this big thing of sugar
Yep.
when I could, I'm only after the energy anyways.
Well, what's crazy about that, Nate, if you think about it, right? Like, so Monster, a 16-ounce can, they're selling at $3. Now, someone comes in the marketplace, and not only comes in the marketplace, but completely dominates it, selling a 2-ounce beverage for the same cost.
Right.
Right. So
cheaper packaging, cheaper product costs.
Yeah. So now, if you're going to call a retailer and you're going to tell them, "Hey, I've got this energy drink, right? It's $3 retail. Your cost is $1.50. You're going to make a double margin." They're going to be thinking to themselves, "Why the hell would anybody spend $3 or $4 on a 2-ounce shot when they can buy Monster and get a whole can?" Right? That you would fail at marketing that. But if they know exactly who the customer is and the problem that you're solving, and that's that quick energy, and you're selling for blue collar people, all their customers are blue collar people. So your entire presentation has to be around that and really showing what makes your product different, right? It goes back to Yeti coolers, right? A Yeti is $400. An Igloo cooler is $40.
Yep.
They do the same thing.
Right.
Right? Why would someone buy the Yeti? Their marketing, their branding, its status, right? You got to have the Yeti, right? And so all of those things play into product development. Even more so, if you think about the Yeti example, I'm posting a story this week on Instagram. When Yeti came into play, they're selling a cooler for $400, right? And so an Igloo is $40. That Igloo cooler, the retailers are paying $20 for, right? Just making up this up. Every time they sell one Igloo cooler, they're making $20. That Yeti cooler is $400, 10 times the cost, but every time they sell one, they're making $200. So if Yeti just sells 10% of what Igloo is doing, Walmart, for example, will make the same money carrying 10 times less stock.
Right.
Right. And so that's the way that you really have to think about your product too. It's like, how does it turn at retail? Right. When I first started selling batteries, I thought about margin only. Right. Hey, I can sell a 4-pack to Dana at Come and Go for $1. he can sell for $3. He's tripling his money, right?
Mm-hmm.
When he sells a pack of Duracells at $6, he's paying $3 for that. Or let's say he's paying $2, twice what he's paying for mine. But every time someone buys that pack of Duracells, he's making $4, right? He's only making $2 every time he sells mine, even though his margins are twice as much almost, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
so that's when I realized like penny profits matter to these stores. So if he's only making $2 on mine and he's making $3 or $4 every time he sells a pack of Duracells, I have to make sure that he can sell 2 to 3 times more of my batteries than he can Duracell, right?
Right.
Or you
Right.
have to adjust that pricing structure. And
I
so,
see.
turns are really important, and that penny profit, that dollar, that the money they make that they can drive to the bank. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a reason why Yeti was very successful. Because again,
Yeah.
one product you can sell and make $200. The other one you
Yeah.
have to sell 10 of them.
Yeah. Yeah. The Yeti story is really interesting because they're obviously selling prestige and a premium feel, which makes sense once you've been in the market for a while and you've got the influencers using your product and stuff like that. But when you first come into the market and your product is 200% more expensive than the competitors, like how do you do that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, so we call that innovation, right? And so why is that innovative, right? Well, they made a better mousetrap, right? It keeps your beverages cold for 4 days. Who the hell needs their beverages cold for 4 days anyhow? Nobody,
Right.
right? But they over-engineered it. They built it super tough. And again, it goes back to how their marketing was. They didn't really market a cooler. You didn't see things out there saying, "Hey, ours keeps things cooler for 4 more days." They didn't show
Right.
comparisons. They showed the lifestyle, right? They showed the fishermen carrying it on their boats, right? They showed
Yep.
hunters and all those things. And then that they built that culture, that community, right?
Yep.
And that's what sells Yetis, the culture and the community.
That's interesting. Um, you know, when it comes to sort of traditional contract manufacturing, injection molding, machining, fabrication, those sorts of services, I think it would be interesting to find a way to apply some of this concept to a rather commoditized service. And I wonder if you've ever had any thoughts like that going through or working with contract manufacturers, how they could have done a better job of incorporating storytelling and branding and things like that into their offering.
Yeah, today, like when you look at like Chinese manufacturing, right? I'm going to China in another week and a half, and the Chinese manufacturers are very good at manufacturing, right?
Mhm.
They're super fast. They get things done. They do things right, right? But that's what they know. They know manufacturing, right? They don't know
Right.
marketing. They don't know sales, and so I think that's why you don't see that today because that's what they're good at. That's the lane they stay in, right?
Hmm.
And so it takes different different strategies and I guess different people to make all that work, right? And so for us, we work with a certain amount of manufacturers in China. We know that they're going to handle all of that. We're going to handle the other stuff, right? And so, that's why, we work with major retailers and all these major retailers, they have an office in China too, right? But they're focused on their one area, and that's the manufacturing and sourcing, not in development and not in creating brands and so forth. And so at the end of the day, Nate, I think to answer your question is there's just too much to worry about to be able to handle all those things. And
Right.
we've all heard like jack of all trades, master of none, right?
Right.
So the factories are the master of manufacturing. The other
Yeah.
things they can get by with, but they're not going to be, the best and most suitable solution.
Right. Yeah, and I understand what you're saying. I think more where I was driving was, in the work that I do promoting contract manufacturers, um, they all say the same things, right? Precision, fast turnaround, tight tolerance, blah, 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 blah. They all say the same thing. And so I'm always looking for like ways to make it more, a better reason why somebody is going to hire this contract manufacturer. So that's kind of where I was driving. Like, how
Yeah.
could a contract manufacturer apply lessons in the product market, the OEM market, to more of a service-based business?
Yeah, I think it kind of comes down to what we're talking about now, like you said, no, the stories, right? Sharing, like, the challenges that happen, right? And
Yep.
expressing that to these new inventors or people that are developing products, because we don't know what we don't know, right? And so if you can bring all the challenges and struggles that you personally have had or others have had, and you tell those stories, they're naturally
Yep.
going to want to avoid those. And so
Right.
if you're working with a manufacturer that has made those mistakes, whether themselves or they've encountered them, you're naturally going to say, I might want to work with these guys because they know what I don't know,
Right.
and they can prevent me from making a lot of mistakes that are very costly, right? And so
Right.
I think it goes back to what we said, modeling your story, right? And
Yep.
understanding the challenges that these new inventors are going to have. And
Yep.
the biggest challenge, though, is they don't know those challenges are coming,
Yep.
because they don't know what they don't know, right? And so
Yep.
you got to do it in a way of which where, again, it's storytelling, right? People like a story because they're not being told, right? It's like
Right.
you're just sharing something. And so I think that they would benefit greatly from that, is really
Yeah.
developing that dialogue.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's funny. I remember actually after I read that book I mentioned, I wrote a blog article, which, when I write blog articles, it's for the purpose of getting traffic to my website, people that are searching for my services. But I wrote this story at the beginning of the blog article about this machine shop that I had worked with. It was a father and son, and they had bought this new machine and they were having trouble keeping it busy. It was a very expensive machine, and they were really struggling with how are they going to generate new business. Anyways, I told this story about this, and I had numerous people reach out to me and be like, yeah, I read that story in your blog. That sounds just like us.
Yeah.
And, and that's why they reached out. So, I mean, it works. It absolutely works.
Yeah, people want to feel like, we all feel like our problems are just our problems, right? Like, no one is dealing with the same stuff we are, but everybody's dealing with the same things we are. It's just
Right.
different proportion, right?
Yep.
Like in my early 20s, I had to worry about, how to make, the car note. And then, in my late 20s, maybe it was how to make the mortgage, right? And then, now it's like, you got to worry about funding orders and such, right? And so now it's like $1 million funding problems, right? But it's
Yep.
still the same proportion, right?
Right.
If you're making $100,000 a year and you have a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month mortgage, having $1 million problem when you're doing 20 or $30 million in business is it's the same ratio, right?
Right.
And so I think when people see that, right, especially when they see from people that are successful having those same problems, it makes them realize, okay, I'm normal, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
something that I've battled really for, like, honestly, my entire career in business, right? I see successful entrepreneurs that are killing it, right? I end up comparing myself to them. And then I think about all the issues and things I'm going through, whether it's legal, compliance, whatever it is. And then you start second guessing yourself. You're like, man, am I cut out to be an entrepreneur? Am I cut out to be a business owner? And then you see guys like Andy Frisella getting on their stories, on their podcast, talking about all the stuff they go through, all the
Yep.
doubt that they have, right? They question themselves as well. And so if someone like that is doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year in sales, hundreds of employees, tens of thousands of influencers, been doing this for the last 20 years, is having those same struggles, it really resonates, right? And
Yeah.
it's twofold. One, it builds that credibility, because again, they're being vulnerable, they're sharing that, you're connecting with them, but also it's lifting you up to realize, like, okay, I'm doing what I need to do. This is just part of the process.
Yep.
And so back to your blog, people are reading that, they're seeing, oh man, this happens to other people. Well, that's one thing. And then secondly, how can I partner with somebody so this doesn't happen to me more frequently?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that would go back to that manufacturer.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think that's great advice, and I think really any company, anybody that's listening to this can apply this philosophy to the stories that they tell on their website. So, just real quick, what, if you could give one piece of advice to, somebody that has a product idea, they feel like this could really be a big thing. What would you say the steps they should take are?
So I mean, first thing is just really understanding what your product is meant to do, right? Is it meant to be more convenient, right? Like what at the end of the day, why does somebody need what you're offering, right?
Right.
And it needs to have that. It needs to have that value. And so I would say that's the first step. It's just understanding. Is it better? Are you selling a vitamin? Or are you selling a pain pill? Right? If I've got an
Hmm.
excruciating headache, I know for me personally, Excedrin usually helps me out, right? Pretty instantly.
Right.
If
Right.
if I have a headache and someone in my office says, "Man, I have one Excedrin left," I'll give it to you for $10. I'm gonna pay $10 for it, right?
Yeah.
Where if I was like, "Man, I'm feeling kind of deficient today in vitamin A. I need a vitamin A vitamin." Probably not gonna pay $10 for it, right? Because you don't see
Right.
those results till down the road. And so, really understanding what are you selling? Are you selling a pain pill? Or are you selling a vitamin, right? And that applies for
I like that.
every single product. And so I think that's the first step, right? And then second step is validating the perception of value, figuring out what is the cost associated with the solution you're providing. Again,
Hmm.
if I'm curing someone of their migraine headache, that's a pretty valuable solution. And so I
Right.
think a lot of people look at cost of goods sold, and then they dictate their value based upon that. So if you're buying something for $1, okay, $5, that's reasonable, right? You got 5 times
Hmm.
margin. But maybe you're cutting yourself short. If you're solving a $10 problem, your price should be $10, right?
Right.
But
Right.
then you have to evaluate, well, is there someone else that's doing it for $5? Because that's the market, right? And so just really understanding A, what your product is doing, what it's serving, and B,
Hmm.
getting that perception of value. And if and if
Right.
and if your price point allows you to sell within that perception of value, then you move on to the next step, right? And that's putting it down on paper, creating it, whether that's a 3D model, something out of clay, and so forth, and just making sure that your thought in theory can physically work, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I always compare that to, I get tons of DMs. People are like, "Man, I've got a killer idea. I got a killer idea." And most of the time, I'm thinking to myself, "Okay, we all have killer ideas, right?" Like, how many people have looked up at the sky at a bird and thought to themselves, "Man, there's got to be a way to make like a device that we can sit in and fly," right?
Yeah.
And that's what an idea is, right?
Yeah.
And so
Exactly.
it's about taking that idea and then making it work, taking it from in theory to on paper to make sure it physically is something you can produce and create.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I always say that. I mean, I know a lot of people in my life that are great idea people, but they are one step people too. They'll take it one step and that's all the further, and then it's on to the next idea. And so having kind of that stick to itiveness and
Yeah.
being able to actually, be committed to it for a while. And like you said, not, you don't have to throw all your eggs in that basket,
Mm-mm.
but you have to put some eggs in it.
Yeah. I think we're all inventors, right? I mean, if you just walk around your house after this call or your office or what have you, and there's things everywhere that we wish were better or more convenient or more affordable, right?
Right.
And there you go. You're an inventor when you do that, right? And
Yeah.
it's about identifying that, and then, like I said, making sure what you're making can work physically, and then making sure the cost is there, and then you
Right.
start developing that, right? But
Right.
like you said, you don't have to do it all at once, right? When we created the AccuBow 10 years ago with my partner Matt, he was a full-time civil engineer making 150 grand a year. He didn't
Right.
quit that job until we were a year and a half in, right? So for a year and a half, we developed it on the side, right? On the
Mhm.
sidelines. And then when we did launch it, we were ready, right? We had everything done, the retail ready, the proposals, the packaging, everything. And we just hit the ground running.
Yep. Yep. Well, I mean, I really enjoyed this conversation. I think that anybody that's looking to develop a product would have benefited from it. So, what type of people would you like to talk to? If somebody's listening, and they had an idea, would you like them to reach out to you, and
Yeah,
where
just
would you like them to be?
I'm on Instagram a lot, and we want to talk to everybody, right? Because even we do a weekly call every Thursday at 5 o'clock. It's an hour call. It's completely free. Anyone's invited. And there's a lot of people on that call that they have no idea what they want to do, right? They just have that entrepreneur spirit, right?
Yeah.
These are the same individuals that maybe they might buy a real estate course, right? They're just looking for things of which they can earn a significant living on. And so on this 1 hour call, we just go over all different things, right? Brainstorming, product ideas, branding, everything else. And so even if someone is just interested in creating something, but they have no idea what they're doing, right? I would plug them into that call, right?
Okay.
And then there's people that, they have a product, right? I think the lowest hanging fruit is individuals that have something that's selling online very well, right? They've already got the product created. Just get that into retail, right? When you're selling on Amazon, if you want to sell 100,000 units, you got to convert 100,000 people, right?
Right.
That's expensive and it's difficult. You have to direct everything to those individuals that are looking for your product. And especially if you have a product that people don't know exists yet, right? A solution. How are they going to look for that? You have to direct everything to them. So if you have a product that's doing very well online, well, let's put that in a retail ready packaging and let's try to get that into the Walmarts of the world. And now if you want to sell 100,000 units, you sell it to Walmart one time, 4,000 stores, right?
Yeah.
25,000 pieces total, right? I mean, 100,000 pieces total. So you sell 25 units per store. You just hit your entire quota that you're doing on Amazon, right?
Right.
And the difference is when you sell to Amazon, you got to ship that to Amazon or ship to the customer. You got to pay Amazon's fees. You got to buy a box. You got to buy ads. When you sell on the Walmart, you just have to give them a rock solid program. You sell it to them. They pick it up in their trucks. You deal with one buyer. You sell it to one person, right? And so your margins may not seem as big as when you're selling on e-commerce, but I'm willing to bet they're bigger in retail because you're eliminating all those other steps. And so that's something we really want to start expanding on is the people that are already successful online. Let's make that retail ready.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
And then finally, if you got an idea or a product and you just don't know where to go, we can help with every single part of the process between taking it to a concept on paper to the consumer, whether that's online or, in stores.
Yep. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks a lot for everything you shared today. And I'm really excited about what you're doing. And I think we're going to continue to work together and, develop some ideas. So
for sure.
Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Nate. I'm excited what's to come.